We are the people's anthem. We are the people's anthem. You're the anthem. You're the anthem. You're the anthem. All of you are the anthem. Who here actually believes it? Yeah. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Was being interviewed, and the reporter asked what I thought would be a basic question: weren't you surprised that this happened in your school? And she was totally unflustered, and she said, no, it's happening everywhere.
In Columbine, they weren't. This was like a one-time. They thought it would be a one-time phenomenon.
There's a level of acceptance in our political system that is shocking, disturbing, and disgusting. There's nothing we can do. Well, it's politics. No, it's not.
Well, I think we thought that other states that were like-minded, states in the Northeast, some of the progressive states, would take action. But it was clear at that time, too, that many legislators, Democrats and Republicans, were nervous about the NRA's actions in their district.
So what Moms Demand do when these hearings happen, there's a bunch of red t-shirts in the room. And what you don't see is a bunch of guys in camo, the NRA guys in the room there showing up for it. They don't. What you have is a bunch of moms, and then you have somebody in a nice suit who's the NRA lobbyist. We are up against the lobbyists. We're not up against gun owners. If this was a group of 100 gun owners, NRA member gun owners, right, let's say, and I asked you a question and said, who here believes that everybody should go and have a background check regardless of whether you buy that gun at a dealer, at a gun show, or online, or from a friend? According to stats, 80% of you would raise your hand and say, I agree with that, of NRA members. Okay? These are not issues that the people have a problem with.
Lots is happening, and yet I think because of the NRA's agenda of guns everywhere, there are increasing events of gun violence, even though we're doing so much more to stop it.
And that goes to young people. When I started in this movement, I saw no justification for the other side. It's one of the reasons I chose this movement amongst many. One of the things that's been very effective for the NRA and their many fellow travelers has been an argument called the slippery slope. And what they say is, well, it might be reasonable, or we might want to think about banning semi-automatic weapons, but you know what? We have to be tough. Because once we do that, next it'll be hunting rifles, and then it'll be handguns, and then the liberals will come to your door and they'll take all your bullets away. Well, first of all, that's just not true. Is that true in the America you live in? It's not true in mine.
But it was clear at that time, too, that many legislators, Democrats and Republicans, were nervous about the NRA's actions in their district. I never thought they were so worried about the money of the NRA as the NRA's ability to mobilize voters in their districts. And that's really what the NRA could do, send out an email and create you as an elected official to get 100 emails against a bill. And for many legislators, that is something you really have to consider. I didn't really care how many emails I got, but many of my colleagues from more conservative communities and more rural communities were very nervous about it, and they were nervous about the impact of the pro-gun lobby, even though it wasn't an anti-gun bill.
So I started Moms Demand Action as a Facebook page at my kitchen counter in Indianapolis, thinking that it would be an online discussion between moms about gun violence. And what happened was that moms wanted to make it an offline movement. They wanted to start chapters of Moms Demand Action where they lived. And within a year, that's what we did. We had a chapter in every single state of the country.
So my name is Sunny, and I became very interested in gun violence prevention because I trained as a physician in New Orleans, where I grew up, where we saw gun violence on a day-to-day basis, and I got to take care of patients who survived, but really were just dealing with physical and emotional issues that you wouldn't believe. And so that's something that I've always been interested in, but I was always too busy. And so when I stopped practicing medicine, I became more active and joined Moms Demand Action 3 years ago.
Really seemed to understand how important it was to alert the public to what was happening. I was getting posts on my Facebook page for a long time and had been following them, and then there was a march in my town, and then there was a community meeting, and so I was just really drawn to them because there were so many ways to be active as a volunteer.
You would turn on the TV in the hours afterward and hear pundits saying the solution was more guns and not more laws. It just made me incredibly angry because it's so counterintuitive.
I'm a social worker, and I spent most of my career doing domestic violence advocacy work. So gun violence was always a part of that and always a concern. But it wasn't until a few summers ago when I just kept seeing post after post of little kids getting a hold of their parents' guns, which were not locked, and killing themselves or other children or their parents. And I just couldn't understand how this could be happening because it's so preventable. And that's when I decided that I really needed to join moms and do something about all aspects of gun violence. My first meeting with Moms Demand Action was in January 2016. And I went to a community meeting, and then a couple months later I got invited to a local meeting for leadership, and by June of that year, that's when I started working on the Westchester chapter. And well, unfortunately, one of the things that's changed are the numbers. When I first started out, they were talking about 88 people being killed a day, then it went up to 90, then up to 93, now it's at 96. So that number is rising really fast. So it's really concerning to me that number is increasing so much. We have seen some great progress in terms of legislation that will prevent gun violence at the state level. We've been amazingly successful at blocking really bad legislation across the country.
When we started Moms Demand Action, we actually were focused on trying to get Congress to pass a bill called Manchin Toomey, which would have closed the loophole that allows unlicensed gun sales without a background check. And that failed by only a handful of votes in the Senate in April of 2013. And I wasn't sure if Moms Demand Action would stick around or what would happen. And really it was the genius of our volunteers who intuitively pivoted to the states and started doing this work in state houses and in boardrooms. And we've had unbelievable success in creating momentum and changing laws. And eventually, this should all culminate in a cathartic moment in Congress, which is changing our laws at the federal level. I'm very excited to see people my kids' age starting to make gun violence prevention a priority issue, particularly a priority voting issue. But the most important thing is this issue stays at the forefront of the national conversation, no matter who's starting the conversation. It really is on every single generation to get off the sidelines and to get involved and to be educated about where their candidates stand and then to vote accordingly.
So when Parkland happened, I'd already been in Moms for about a year and a half, I guess it was just about 2 years, but a year and a half in terms of leadership. And it was very clearly a different vibe in terms of the calls that we were getting from people who wanted to get involved.
So, people from March for Our Lives, my friends and I, we were talking about how there's this cycle that happens when there's school shootings or just shootings in general, where people send their thoughts and prayers. They maybe talk about the gun debate for about a week or so, and then it goes back to the next shooting. But I think with Parkland, the big thing is they didn't take the thoughts and prayers. They didn't say, oh, we need time to grieve. When people say, oh, it's not the time, this is the time to grieve, to mourn, and they said our way of doing that is to make change, is to start a movement. So I think they broke the cycle in a way in where they didn't sit down, they kind of stood up and they spoke out about what they wanted to do. And seeing young people do that especially inspired me and inspired a lot of other people that it's time to make a change, and we can't stay quiet about the gun debate. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things that need change, and they're not going to happen overnight. So I think the Parkland kids, they came out, they did their interviews a few days after the shooting, and they showed the strength that they needed to get the word out and to have other people get the word out as well.
Of course, after every incident, there's a little uptake in that, but this was like nothing I've ever seen. I was onboarding new volunteers I'd roll out of bed, I'd get up at 8 in the morning, and I'd still be working on Mom's Demand Action work at 2 in the morning. So just to keep up with the number of people who wanted to join and trying to get them signed up and trained and out there doing the work. I think social media has absolutely been key. I've worked my entire career in nonprofits, and never in my life have I seen an organization that's 5 years old accomplish what Moms Demand Action has accomplished.
Blood runs wild of innocent children being killed in the street. Today is the birthday of Hydea Pendleton, who was senselessly shot down in Chicago. So before we pass this mic to these young people who dare to stand tall and continue this work in these streets, who dare to stand tall and say enough is enough, before we bring these young people to this stage, before we step off to this bridge, let's remember those that we lost and we loved.
Students have really given the movement a new energy, and almost like a passing of the baton. It doesn't feel like all of the adults are the only ones who can do anything anymore.
Hi, my name is Jessica Moskowitz. I'm 16 years old.
I'm Sam Roth. I'm 16 years old.
My name is Abe Baker Butler, and I'm 16 years old. It really bothers me when adults think that they're the only ones that can make change, because they're wrong.
I'm the communications director of March for Our Lives, New York City. So I've always been really inspired by politics and activism and all that stuff. I had a friend who went to Parkland. She survived the tragedy, and after that I was on Facebook just seeing how everyone was reacting.
When I first submitted an idea to my school for a grant for a gun violence program, gun violence awareness program, it was right after the Las Vegas shooting, and I remember, it's something that had always been very important to me. I thought that this issue is unique to America, and as I grown up, I noticed, especially with schools, I've been doing lockdown drills since kindergarten, but I had never really processed what it was about.
So I've been interested in gun safety for a while. I wrote about it for my school newspaper, I read about it in the newspaper, but I didn't really get involved as an activist on the issue until the Parkland shooting.
The sister marches were starting to form, so I reached out to the lead organizer, Alex Clavering, to see how I could help. And then I just started doing interviews with a bunch of people and meeting all these different organizations, and we all just started working together. It was about 5 weeks of just really intense work up until March 24th, and then from then we just kind of kept going. After these tragedies, they say let them grieve, but I think something really inspiring is that the Parkland kids kind of were like, our way of grieving is to start a movement, is to start making change. So we can't pretend that grieving or sending prayers is what they want when they're telling us it's not. So we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep talking about the issues.
No more silence. End the violence. No more silence. End the violence.
So on the national scale, it kind of started with Emma Gonzalez, David Hogg, Delaney Tarr, and they kind of just wanted a way to say that you're gonna send us thoughts and prayers, but we're gonna show you the power that the youth have and that the power that we can spread. But basically, it was just a way to get everybody involved, to show up in big numbers, and by doing it in Washington, it was kind of a symbol to the White House and to different administrations, different people in power, to say that if you're not gonna vote on common sense gun legislature, if you're not gonna talk about the issues, if you're not gonna help save our lives, then we're gonna march for our lives. And it was kind of just to show people the power that we have, and that the issues aren't going away. For me, in New York, there's March for Our Lives New York, and there's March for Our Lives New York City. I kind of work with both of them, but March for Our Lives New York City was the one that planned the march on the 24th. And for us, it was kind of, people can't always get to Washington. They can't get to places where there's national things going on. But if we can have them around the country or even around the world, that shows that we're all standing up together, regardless if you can be there in person or not.
So after the Vegas shooting, I got an email from my school. There's a grant fund in my school, an innovation fund for students who can submit ideas for grants. So I submitted a grant, like not thinking much of it the day after Vegas. I was like, you know what, maybe it's about time that we had a discussion, a student-led discussion. This was before a lot of student voice in gun violence, because again, as many people have been saying, like Sandy Hook, there weren't a lot of high-profile shootings before Parkland where the kids really saw that they were, not only were they old enough, but they really saw that they were in a position that they could have been able to take action, and that this is going to be it. And so after I submitted my grant, I kind of came up with a budget with support from staff at the school. The staff had been like great, really supportive. A lot of my teachers, they agreed with me. And after I received the grant, I kind of got a group together. I got gun violence advocates, I got survivors.
When we talk about these anecdotes of certain stories, I mean, there's 33,000 gun deaths in this country. Like Michael said before, that has added up in America's domestic history to more deaths in every single war that we fought in. That's World War II, that's World War I, that's Korea, that's Vietnam, that's the Civil War.
The symposium was mainly geared, my main focus was just to kind of take something into the town that hadn't really been talked about, a student-led initiative, that was a key, into really having a discussion that was uncomfortable for a lot of people about gun violence, to kind of educate people, to get them emotionally aware and to understand there is something they can do about it. And that was the key for me. That allowed me to recognize that, okay, there is really something that anybody can do here. And so that was really a big step. I think what mainly that I was hoping to achieve and that I set out to achieve and that I think I somewhat achieved from the symposium was that I was really able to look people in the eye and see that this had impacted them and this had changed their mindset, and it was something disturbing. I don't want to disturb people, but it's a disturbing issue, and people were clearly impacted by the issue and wanted to help in any way. I had so many people I'd never met come up to me after and tell me, you know, like this really disturbed them. And even though they'd been hearing clips on the news and things, just a personal experience, especially the survivor story, to match the name with the story, with the face right in front of you, I think that was something that really hit home for people. And that was really my goal, just for people to be emotionally impacted and invigorated by this. I think that was the key.
Firstly, how ironic is it that a car's function is to get you places, and yes, it can kill someone. A gun's function is to be insured. And the fact that you don't need that to be registered, that the Second Amendment, no doubt, is a right that's important to our history. But the fact that you aren't held accountable to be responsible for your gun because it's your freedom, no, that's a ploy. That's for the gun manufacturers. And I think what people don't understand a lot is that a lot of the political things that are pushed and the legislation that's pushed by opposers of gun reform for gun violence prevention, I think, is something, a lot of things that are pushed by gun manufacturers for the success of the gun industry. And I think it's not about that. I think that if we have the responsibility of handling the killing machine, that everybody should be held accountable for making sure that they're responsible for them. Just like if you're caught with a DUI, you get points on the license, etc. It's a killing machine, for God's sake.
I worked on a special election for a state senate campaign, and that really, going door to door and talking to people, really inspired me. And that really inspired me into seeing like the impact this could have on one specific person.
I got a wonderful email from an NRA member in my district in Yonkers after I voted for the bill, thanking me and saying he canceled his NRA membership because of what happened at Sandy Hook.
And just those simple interactions, door canvassing, that really inspired my project a lot into seeing, okay, what can I do to kind of get this message through to everyday people.
The involvement of young people who were not even eligible to vote, and their intensity about that they are going to get this done and they are not going to be deterred and they're not going to take half measures. We didn't have that before after Sandy Hook. Sandy Hook was a tragedy of terrible proportions. The idea that these little children were gunned down, it was just, it went to the core of who you were as a person. This did as well, but this empowered young people from their school and throughout the country. And to their credit, they embraced the communities of color. I represented Yonkers, where kids got killed occasionally, mostly black and brown kids over the years. And those kids wanted to participate as well. And the kids of Parkland were able to build a diverse movement.
I see a trend from the community and trend from citizens where I've never seen before since February 14th, where we have, in the past, people would not get involved, where people just, the thing is to not cooperate with law enforcement. And then I started to see it get little by little better and better. People might cooperate but not give their name, but something happened a little more after Parkland, in my experience, where people are cooperating and people are identifying themselves, just saying enough is enough.
So I've been interested in gun safety for a while. I wrote about it for my school newspaper, I read about it in the newspaper, but I didn't really get involved as an activist on the issue until the Parkland shooting. And the Parkland shooting, I think what really changed was I saw that there were other youth like me who were getting involved in this issue and that they were starting to make a difference and that they were being heard. From there, I was one of the organizers of my school's walkout. We were featured on MSNBC and various other news outlets. Then it kind of seemed like gun safety might unfortunately fade into the background, and I didn't want that to happen. So the other walkout organizers and I, we got together and tried to figure out what we could do to keep this issue on the public conscience. And the conclusion we came to was that by holding candidate forums, we could, specifically on gun safety and gun violence, we could make sure that this issue stayed in the news. And that's what we've been doing. We've grown to be a group that's called the Westchester Student Coalition Against Gun Violence. We have over 30 members from over 10 school districts, and we've organized forums with state Senate candidates, Congress people. At the forum we had between state Senate candidates Shelley Mayer, who was a Democrat, and Julie Killian, who was a Republican, I was one of the two moderators. And that was one of the most amazing experiences I've had. As I was sitting there, I couldn't really envision what it was going to be like beforehand, but as I was sitting there, I had the microphone. I and my co-moderator were in control of these adults, of these political candidates. And we were controlling the discussion, and we were asking them questions that we and the rest of their constituents wanted the answers to. And I just found that so powerful. Age is not what decides whether you can get something done when you're an advocate on an issue. We have a local newspaper here in my town, and someone published a letter saying that teens shouldn't focus on gun safety, they're not making a difference, they should focus on bullying and teen opioid use. And I remember as I was reading this, I was pacing back and forth in my kitchen. I was just so angry that anyone could write something like this and that it could be in print in a real newspaper. So I decided, listen, I have to do something about this. So I sat down, I spent like a week writing a response to the article, and I submitted to the newspaper and it got published. And then the other guy never wrote back. It showed that whether it was through forums or through writing or through lobbying, I could make a real difference. So I think a lot of teens and adults too oftentimes have trouble figuring out how they can get involved. And one thing I would say is think about things more broadly than you would. Don't think about it as just, oh, we talk to this person, they do what we want, or we give them money, we do what they want. Don't think of it as, transactional or something like that. Change is a slow process inherently. But I would say that there's a lot teens can do. And I think something important to realize is that adults are an ally. They should be and can be an ally in activism. And I think what teens are really good at is raising awareness and spreading the word and coming up with new viewpoints on an issue.
These young children his students. They're very vocal, and I feel like they're saying things that a lot of the older people were afraid to say. They're not playing, or they're not afraid to just tell the truth. And the truth is that young people are dying at alarming rates, and that's the truth.
I think volunteering with the campaign is something very powerful, but I also think a route that I haven't really taken, but I think a lot of students should take if they want to get involved, is really start a club at your school and really get involved. There are a lot of great grassroots groups that have local divisions such as Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action. Try to get involved with local networks in the area. Not just, it doesn't have to be through a politician. I think that's something that's really important. Democracy is it's shaped towards the people, and when the people can gather and they really are inspired by an issue and they can be activists on the issue, I think that's more powerful than anything.
Organizing is sort of this unglamorous, heavy lifting, painstaking process, and it isn't always going to make national news or even local news, but showing up every day, it's like drips on a rock. Making calls, sending emails, showing up at gun bill hearings, going to state houses, meeting with your members of Congress when they're in district, and just continuing to organize around the issue.
Just as a regular citizen, you know, it's not really original to see something, but so I don't have an original way to say that, but that's the way. I've had an experience just here in Westchester County, New York, where something happened after Parkland, where somebody was not only cooperating, being overt about it. You know, this is the person, this is what they're doing, and I'm saying it to you, and it's on the record. Like I said, people sometimes have a fear of cooperating, but no, that doesn't work anymore. We saw what happened in Parkland where things slipped through the cracks. So if you see something, get involved and be overt. I mean, in this day and age of the internet, you know, tell one person, tell 10 people, tell as many agencies you can, and particularly call ATF if it's a gun violation, but also call your local police department. And in general, when I say the difference is, don't be shy, you know, don't be shy. You know, be very, very loud and vocal.
Well, I think the average person, has to step up and do something. Right now is a moment in time in America that you can't sit on the sidelines.
All you have to do first is speak up. You know, if you talk to someone and you say, hey, I don't agree with what you just said, can we have a conversation about it? That's starting change. Through social media, you reach out to people who you see are making the change, but I think a lot of people kind of make it as if it's a media storm, that in order to get involved, you have to be in front of the camera, you have to be doing things on a national level. And although that's great, that takes time, that takes effort. You don't need to be, you know, the poster child. You don't need to be the face of something to be part of a movement. I think for youth, it's hard because, you know, we're in school, we have busy lives, we don't know where to fit in activism. So I think you have to start, you know, grassroots. You have to start at the bottom and work your way towards the top. But I think a big thing is that people worry that their voices aren't gonna matter, that what they're fighting for isn't gonna happen because no one's gonna hear them. But I think everybody's voice matters. You know, everything we do to try to make change matters. So I would say to people that want to starting your schools and then work out from there. I think that's also a generational thing. You know, there were shootings. Columbine was 1999, I believe, and I mean, social media wasn't really around as much. So although that's a big thing in our minds now, through the work of social media, you can have things in Washington and things in New York City and things in Florida and things in all different states and in England and China and just places all around the world, because you know people across the state and across the nation through social media. Through technology, you're able to, I think the big thing is you can reach a larger scale of people and you can have a bigger network working together, because one person can't make change overnight. So there are two sides of a mass shooting, and I'm not going to talk about one mass shooting, but the issue in particular is, again, on social media, specifically on Twitter, while there's a lot of outrage at a madman who would just come into a school and shoot up these children after shootings, I think that something that changes in social media is the more people see activism and see the importance of gun reform, there's an equal amount of backlash from groups like the NRA and its supporters. Our country has been so divided into two different groups, either conservative or liberal, pro-gun, anti-gun, pro-life, pro-choice, etc.
I think that on social media there are two clashing forces, and I think the forces between the two have increased. So social media has had positive and negative impacts. I think it's increased a lot of people recognizing that they can get involved and they can get their voice through to people, especially the survivors from Parkland whose Twitter accounts kind of went very viral, and they were able to get their message and connect to a lot of kids and inspire. It was a great network to inspire other youth. And also I think the negative effect, the backlash, I think it's something that in this country there will always be people who are very, not just pro-Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is vital to, I think, our country. A lot of people that are anti-gun reform, I think we'll always have that in our country, but the strongest thing is if we know that we have a coalition of people who are really invigorated by a sense of morals, and they really feel deep down that this is important. We are going to make sure that our students are safe at schools, our parents are safe at work. I think that when people are connected by a common moral issue, I think that will always triumph over any troll or anybody who is simply just anti-change.
I would say social media has been a huge factor in this movement. If you look at the Parkland activists, I think they're a perfect exemplar of the role social media has played. That's one of the ways they really rose to prominence, and now it's one of the ways that they're really exerting their influence. I remember I was very impressed using social media as a way to spread a message or spread an action item that teens are really good at, and that's played a huge role in this movement.
Working together, gun violence has no borders. Gun violence knows no borders. Gun violence doesn't care where you live. Gun violence doesn't care how much money you make. Gun violence doesn't care your race, creed, or religion. So us continuing to work together, we have to do more to prevent more lives. My son was an honor roll student. My son had a scholarship to St. John's University, so there's no reason why my son should not still be living here. Gun violence to me is preventable. It can be, and people like us, if we continue working together, building coalition partners, we can end gun violence. I truly do believe that we can.
I don't care if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican. These school shootings, Democratic children are being killed and Republican children are being killed. This is not a partisan political issue. We want to pass this law in New York State. We want to pass the red flag bill. We want to do it now. It will save lives. It will save lives and will be a model for the nation.
I really do think it's on every single generation, from baby boomers down to Generation Z, to get off the sidelines and vote on this issue, to get involved and to be passionate about gun violence prevention. 96 Americans are shot and killed every day. Nearly 40,000 Americans die from gun violence every year. This issue isn't going away, and yet lawmakers have the power to stop it. And so until every single person in this country gets involved and makes this a priority, it will continue. So I'm hopeful over the next 5 years that we will see more and more Americans making this their priority. Right now it's jobs, education, and healthcare, and those are important things. But gun violence prevention is a life or death issue, and if we voted the right way on it, we could fix this crisis really quickly.
Kind of a symbol to the White House and to different administrations, different people in power, to say that if you're not going to vote on common sense gun legislature, if you're not going to talk about the issues, if you're not going to help save our lives, then we're going to march for our lives.
Please write your letter, send your email, make your voice heard, organize your own club in your own school. You will help us change this country, but we need every person. Think about running for office. Think about running for the school board, the town council, the assembly, or the Senate. The New York State Assembly is full of young new members. You can run. You can run when you're young. You can get the signatures on the petition. You can figure it out. It's not that complicated. And get in the process. Don't doubt your confidence. Don't doubt your voice. You have something to say. We need you in this elected political process.
We really are making an impact, and that you can make an impact in any way that feels right for you. It's because there are millions of us coming together and fighting this that change is happening.
ATF would not have an official position on gun control, but as an individual who's worked there for 28 years, I have a personal opinion that gun control is not where it's at. I mean, I can repeat all the incidents, whether it's Newtown, Connecticut, Las Vegas, Columbine, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, and then most recently on Valentine's Day, Parkland, Florida. And in my opinion, it's just push has come to shove, and Plan A isn't working, and Plan B needs to occur. It's just too easy for too many people to get firearms, and in particular firearms, which you've seen, most people have seen in the news when these mass shootings happen, are AR-15 and assault rifles, which in my opinion are just unnecessary for anyone besides law enforcement and military.
When we together just sit and talk, and we take away for a second that computer aspect that's sitting behind a screen, and we really talk to each other as human beings. For example, we have town halls, we have conversations, we have debate. I think that's just so important to our society. It's the importance of any issue in our society to do that.
Second Amendment is a societal right to control your destiny as a nation, as a colony, as a state. It has nothing to do with individual rights so that people can own weapons and kill each other.
I think being a part of this gun safety movement, it's made me realize that I really can do something, and that when people are united and there's a large group of people, things can really get done.
I have sat and watched for years as urban violence has too often been left out of the national conversation but guns. And I am here today to say to you, no more.